P here with another episode of Steelers Touchdown Under, doing a live for you guys. Awesome. It's been a big Christmas week. We're going into New Year. The Steelers beat the Bengals. The Steelers have got the Seahawks. They can win this week. Who knows what it means for our playoff spot? Well, I know what it means. It means we get closer. Welcome to the live chat. Sean, you're in there first. Sorry we took a little bit longer. We had a couple of technical difficulties on my end. You've just got me today. No Marky D, no Shannon White. But that's cool because you've already had a show from Shannon White this week. You've got another one coming tomorrow. We did a game preview as well. But I almost put out a video, or especially said it was Friday. Yeah, look, I was 50-50 on this one, I got to say, but it's been a while since I did a live with you guys. I want to make sure we get you at least one live a week as per. That's what we want to do when we set up the channel, if not more, when I can do them. But yeah, kind of excited to be here with you guys because I've been sitting on a video for the last few days around Jalen Smith. And I was going to put out the video today instead of doing the live. And I thought, no, I want to talk about it because I love the live chat. I love the questions. And it's a really interesting topic because when I sort of had this theme about the patchwork Steelers team, and I talked about that when I did the start of the week with the reaction video to the Steelers win over the Bengals, it sort of is headlined by Jalen Smith. So we're going to talk about him a little bit in this show and what he does there. What are the usual things we're about to crack through the injury report, all those good things and more. But yeah, does Rudolph keep slaying? 100%, mate. Like, I mean, he freaking kicked ass. Absolutely kicked ass. Love the spelling there. And I love the whole idea of like, can he leave other teams with a red bloody nose? That's kind of the cool thing. I mean, it's funny. I was doing a lot of, we'll focus on the Seahawks, but I was sort of thinking about it before I went out with the show today. And I was like, man, they win this week or they look pretty good this week. I mean, I'm really keen to see what they do against the Ravens. I don't think that's as much of a lock as people realize, particularly with the way the Steelers often have the Ravens figured out. But yeah, let's get into the injury report for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Kenny Pickett's listed as questionable. We obviously know that Mike Tomlin came out and committed to Mason Rudolph being the starter. That is the right move. It's the right move by everyone. Kenny Pickett might be frustrated. But you know what? I really like Kenny. People know I'm on the Kenny train. I'm like, frustrate Kenny Pickett. Good. Frustrate him. Make him come back and make him like next year with a new OC even more fired up. That's a good thing. That is a good problem to have. Two people wanting to be the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers on that team. So I'm excited by that actually. Obviously, I don't want him frustrated if he's going to take the field and stuff like that. But, I'm excited by the fact that there's people competing for the spot. Now, Trenton Thompson is out of the game. That is probably no surprise to most people. Alana Roberts is out. That's costly. Minka's out. That's costly. Isaac Seumalo did not practice Friday. I'd assume he's played. They're probably just resting that shoulder. You can tell because he didn't practice on Wednesday. That's usually a Veterans Day as well. Full practice Thursday. Then they're easing down the work and giving his shoulder a break Friday. That all makes sense. Najee Harris, who did not practice Wednesday, was limited Thursday with his knee. Full practice Friday. I think that's fine. This is very typical of a lot of running backs when you come down the stretch and later into the season. These sorts of things happen. So where you niggle, everyone's got a niggling injury at this point in time. So it's not surprising to see a guy like him on the roster, a power back as well, have some level of injury designation. We'll move down to the Seahawks because then we can crack in with all the context. They have not put up their Friday practice designations yet and game status. Now that makes sense because obviously East Coast versus West Coast, it's only just gone 5 p.m. on the East Coast or 5:15 p.m. on the East Coast. So we may not see this yet because they may still be finishing that out. The NFL has rules about when you've got to put that out, but they're still within that threshold. However, you have got some interesting guys that did not practice all week. Jordan Brooks, really key linebacker for them so far, hasn't practiced. Mario Edwards, Dwayne Eskridge. Eskridge hasn't really been used that much in the offense this year. I think he's got like less than 140 yards on offense, so not the biggest deal in the world for them. When I did not practice Jason Peters, that could be an issue on the O-line, but because Abraham Lucas practiced, that's good. Remember, they've got Charles Cross and Lucas there, so they've definitely got still tackles, depending on what Peterson's doing on the O-line. Jackson Smith and Jigma was full practice. He's a headline name there. Kenneth Walker, shoulder and illness, did not practice Wednesday, did not practice Thursday. Now, I still expect him to play, but if he doesn't make that team, that's going to be a really big benefit for the Steelers. And we're going to talk about the run game a little bit later on in the show as well. So that could be a real bonus for the Steelers. But obviously, we want to take on their best team and we want to beat their best team. Like, that's the attitude that it's got to be. Tyler Lockett was rested as well on Thursday after being limited on Wednesday. I don't read too much into that, him being a veteran player, but we will see how that looks probably in the next 6 to 12, 24 hours. We'll know better what that means in terms of those guys being injured or out of the game. So I just realized I didn't bring up the injury report for you guys. My apologies there. I'm too busy trying to quarterback on my own. Yeah, Portner, you hit the nail on the head, mate. Like, I feel like this was what it was like last week, where as soon as the first play of the game happened, you're like, whoa, okay, I'm down for this. This could be good. This might be fun to watch. I think you hit the nail absolutely on the head. I said to my wife, like, I feel like the Steelers, you can't bet against them on Christmas, because last year we had the Kenny Pickett Raiders. That was awesome. But this had a really flowy feel to it. And it's like Jet Devil brings up. I had a comment from JJ, who I haven't seen in the live chat in a long time the other day. So sorry, I had that in my head. But Jet Devil says 4 TDs, 350 yards, mostly going up. Yeah, I could see this really going down to the run game. I think we'll definitely talk about that as the show goes on, because I think that's really, really key. But I want to go back to the patchwork team that this is. So we know the season started. We brought in Atlanta Roberts. We brought in Cole Holcomb. Had Mark Robinson there. They had a couple of other guys, sort of who's the sort of fourth inside linebacker. They also had the situation with Nick Herbig, where it was like, is Nick Herbig going to play inside? They've definitely been committed to him only playing outside, because they would have used him by now there. So I feel like they're committed to that. That's not to say they don't try to move him in a future season, but they're clearly locked in this season to having him play as an edge rusher. So that's been kind of the interesting narrative as you went into the season. That's what they said they would do. Then you had the situation where they were able to bring in Quan Alexander. Now, when they brought in Quan Alexander, I didn't think he could. I knew he was capable of playing at the level that he played at. I didn't necessarily think he was going to play at that level, given his age and injury history. So they bring him in. He works. Things are looking really cool and hunky-dory. We've got 3 safeties. We've got Keanu Neal, Kazi, and Minka Fitzpatrick going. This is obviously before the injuries early on in the season. We've got these 3 guys. Neal can play down in the box. We've got Quan, we've got Holcomb, we've got Atlanta Roberts. We've basically got 4 linebackers, depending on the scheme and context. That's working really, really, really cool. Really, really good potential. Really, it's just about game time and adjusting. Now, we know how many of those guys had injuries after that. Now, Kazi's now suspended for the season. Keanu Neal looks like that injury was season-ending. I get why I haven't put him in injury reserve, because you can get him late in the season back. You can get him back against a team like the Ravens. It would be very beneficial. But now, so you're in the situation, and Miles Jack, like I was thrilled that they brought him back. My plan with them last year, or my where I was sitting, if you rewind the tape back to our first few shows in February, I was like, cut the guy and then bring him back on a cheap deal if no one gets him. And so I'm not surprised. I didn't think he was terrible. I just didn't think he was worth the money that he was on, and I thought he was a Steelers number 2. But if you had Miles Jack, Atlanta Roberts, and Cole Holcomb, you'd have been pretty happy with that. We got a bonus when we got Quant, but to have all 4 of those guys would have been pretty cool. But I get Miles Jack going, yeah, I might not come back for that money. I may as well just move on with my life and not get, have the injuries and all the effects of those. Totally get that, particularly playing linebacker. So that's the situation. We saw the injuries. We've now guys like Michael Walker through there. We've had guys like Blake Martinez through there. We've had guys like Jalen. Now we brought in Jalen Smith. My gosh, I'm terrible. I haven't had my coffee before I did the show. This is why. But you brought Jalen Smith in. Now, what people don't know, the Steelers have actually used, and they've got Kyron Johnson on the roster. He's only played special teams. So the Steelers have 12 linebackers on the roster right now that have seen game time so far. Now, that does not include Jalen Smith. But if you take out the outside linebackers, you get 4 of them. You get 8 linebackers. So if Jalen Smith was to play and get elevated in the next 2 games, he will be the 9th inside linebacker that's seen some level of game time this season. The 9th. Like, that's if you have a depth chart 4 deep of that, and maybe you've got 3 deep and you've got a box safety, which is kind of really where the Steelers have been at. You've got that situation. you're now on the second, you're past your second rotation of those 4 guys. That's where the Steelers are sitting right now in terms of who they've brought in and played at linebacker. The cohesiveness in that defense, like, of course they're going to be leaky. And then you think about the cornerback situation they've had, the topsy-turvy play at defensive line. Like, Cam Hayward's not fully at his best. He looks like he's getting better and recovering more after that injury or learning to play with it. Benton's really good. But Ogunjobi's actually looked good the last 2 weeks. But before that, the play's been kind of all over the place there. So they're not getting that solid piece. The only real strong unit right now is the outside linebackers. That's the only unit you can sit there on the defense and say, that's rock solid. But they're finding a way to win. And that's the cool thing about this. That's why I call it this patchwork roster, this patchwork team, because this team are finding a way to come together. Now, the veteran heads are really big on that. Then we see it on offense, right? We see Mason Rudolph, like, come into this team, and we'll talk a lot about him in the show. Like, we'll talk about that, like, in terms of what he did. But Allen Robinson, Mason Rudolph comes in. You see Allen Robinson get, I think it was 4 from 6 or 4 from 8 targets. You start to see him worked into the offense more. I was actually quite surprised, and it's kind of a sordid state of affairs in some ways, because you'd think that Allen Robinson would be like at 500 or 600 yards at this point in the season. But I was surprised to see that he actually had 280 yards when I went up and looked up some stats this week. But it is cool to see those veterans be worked in. Portner says, I'll go in the live chat, Portner says, Ravens will lock up the one on Monday. We'll see Huntley next week. This is it, right? I mean, I'm pretty high on Miami, though. So, I mean, they're my actual AFC pick right now to make the Super Bowl. But, yeah, I mean, hey, it would help us. And then who knows if we're in there, especially against an AFC North team, if we get matched up against one of them. Jess says, yeah, Karen Johnson. Portner says, Sunday, Monday, yeah, same thing. Dude left there. This is my strike update. Yeah, but he bought like a hockey team. He started to learn to become a plumber. He's doing something else. Yeah, Joe, I'm telling you, there's a chance. Obviously, things have got to go right and all that sort of stuff. It was funny, over Christmas, I had a mate over who's a Cowboys fan, and he was telling me, oh, how good are the Browns going? And I was like, yeah, but, I was trying to explain the context. He's like, well, they're better than you guys. And it sucks because, like, the winning record, they are better than us. But then, are they a better team than the Steelers? I don't think so. If I'm playing a game, and if the AFC Championship tomorrow was the Browns versus Steelers, I'm backing the Steelers team. But that's just me. Maybe that's the diehard fan. That's the black and gold goggles. But yeah, well, going into Mason Rudolph. So it's amazing this week how many people are now saying positive things. And even Pat P talked about how much he'd been like killing them for 16 weeks. And then the Bengals got a little bit of that. Now, some of it, you're like, are they trying to say things out there to put like some sort of a narrative out there? Are they trying to make, I don't really think there's no Seahawks player sitting there going, oh, a Steelers player in a press conference said Mason Rudolph was, slaying us all 16 weeks. I'm scared now, but that's not going to happen. So it is got to be genuine. The second piece is Bucky Brooks was talking about this on Move the Sticks with the Seattle Seahawks. Not Seattle Seahawks. The Denver Broncos situation with former Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson getting yelled at on the sideline. And Good Morning Football had said not a lot of players came to his defense. Well, in that situation, how can you, if you're on those contracts, you're putting yourself out of favor with the coach and the management? Well, the same thing kind of sits here in the Steelers. You can't be going through all this stress all year, and then there be one guy that might be playing better and playing in the scout team and sit there and after the game say, we should have played Mason Rudolph. I mean, we've got a Crawford talked about kneeling the ball away. Deontay makes certain comments. Like, you've got to be cohesive within the team. You've got to keep things internal. It is interesting, though, because, like, how quickly I think Tomlin did actually flip to Mason. I thought he'd be a bit more stubborn than that. That actually excites me about who we might bring in as an OC. And I can't wait to talk about that in a couple of weeks' time, depending, or maybe hopefully a lot longer than that if we can make the playoffs. But I think it is interesting, this narrative that now people are like, well, Mason does this, Mason does this, Mason does that. And it's kind of an interesting triangle of quarterbacks going on, because there's a lot of stuff in the offseason about how close Mitch and Kenny are. Mason always gets really, really well credited, particularly by Pickett up until this point. Mitch and Mason, you don't really hear that much about, but they always talk about all three quarterbacks are great. But now there's that interesting dynamic. I'm really interested to see how that plays out because obviously Kenny Pickett will be on the roster next year. You're hoping they bring Mason back. But most of us, I think, are sitting here going, Mitch doesn't come back. And that's what we want. Saves his cap, is better. He obviously can't. He's not going to ever be a game winner for this team. Yeah, he can be a serviceable backup maybe for some teams, but he's not a game winner, and therefore he shouldn't be on this team. Portnoy says, as much as I hate to admit it, I'm kind of rooting for Joe Flacco. Yeah, I never hated Joe Flacco as much as a lot of Steeler fans. I just didn't. I don't know. It just didn't have that effect on me. Sorry, it's water. I've got a croaky voice today. I'm when doing the show alone. There's no pause in it. And J-Double says, if Kenny plays during that 3-game losing streak, we're second in the division. That being said, this is it. So Kenny is like a game winner, but Mason, how to put this? If you are like walking out tomorrow and saying, I'm going to get one guy, he's going to be able to be healthy for the season, you pick and pick it every time. Game winner, mobility, thorough, will to win. I'm not saying that Mason Rudolph doesn't have that will to win, but that's like an X factor if you think about it in a Madden context. That's Kenny Pickett's thing. Chemistry with the guys, toughness, all those things. But Mason is a better context player. So you go, Mason, you've got this game, you've got these guys fit, you need to do this, boom, you win. And he talked about that, and it came up in one of the shows I did with Shannon. Obviously, you guys are going to get one of them tomorrow. But Mason talked about this when he was interviewed about how is it possible for him to have such explosive plays coming in as the technically QB3 on the roster. And he said, I played to what the defense gave me. And that is interesting when you think about the problems in that kind of offense, which we still see play out week to week. That is not going to change until there's a newer system in the offseason. But Mason Rudolph has found a way with that veteran savviness, with having all that background from prior experience, going through adversity, being able to tailor plays, probably it's easier for Sullivan and him to probably work together than it is Pickett. That doesn't mean that he's got a better relationship than Pickett and Sullivan, but with that veteran, that time on the team, that understanding, it probably a bit there. The second thing is because the Steelers offense is it's very hard to describe what it is and put it in one bucket. Mason coming from an air raid offensive system in college where it was about the players, let the players get open, you make the play, right? So he's got the arm, he's got pretty good accuracy, make the play. That is very helpful on a team that has a stuffed up offense is the best way to say it, or a patchwork offense if we stick with that team. And it's also very, very good in a situation where you've got some veteran guys, you've got some young guys. There's you can't really even say Deontay's wide receiver number one. So this sort of patchwork, hodgepodge, conglomerate of offensive players, it actually really fits, and a run game that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It actually really fits what Mason can provide. Now, as I said, as you rightly said, sorry, J-Devil, if Kenny had played during those games, I think we definitely would have been the Patriots. He was looking pretty good against the Cardinals. And if they got up by a touchdown that game, they probably could have won that game because the Cardinals have been forced to throw football more. I reckon they could have forced Kyle Murray into mistakes. The Steelers are very good at doing that the latter half of the game through adjustments, all those good things. But Kenny Pickett went out in that game and he was 7 for 10. I think it was for about 70-something yards. But he was playing pretty well. So I agree with you. And then we're not in this boat where we're trying to scrape into the playoffs. But we are in that boat right now. And in some ways, it's like Shannon was talking about in the show yesterday, the shows that I did with him yesterday. I said, there's one out there ready, there's one coming out. But he talked about Broderick Jones and bad habits, potentially learning bad habits at right tackle with everything going on. We've heard about that before with players learning bad habits when they're out of position. Kenny Pickett's been out of a good offense since he came to the Steelers. And so I'm kind of excited the fact that if you do rest him, you do, let's see what happens. If Mason plays atrociously for whatever reason, then you do probably have to bring him back against the Ravens. But it's not the worst thing if we ride out and see if we make the playoffs with Mason. And then if we get there, you ride the hot hand and you keep Mason on a short leash. I think Mason with all the pressures he's been under, it's kind of cool to see. I reckon he can operate with this. I reckon he could play 5 or 6 games pretty well to go from now, if he absolutely has to. I think he's got that in him. And we want to, if we're serious about bringing the guy back, because we're going to have to pay him a couple of $1 million. He's going to have to earn more than what he's on right now. Because why you just say, well, you guys can keep, Money Mitch, who literally throws money away. You can just keep him instead of bringing him back. I'll go find another team. So the Steelers are going to spend $2 or $3 million on Mason. We want to make sure that it's definitely on a 2 or 3 year deal. It's definitely worth it with him. You probably put incentives in there too, because who knows what's going to happen next year. But yeah, it is really exciting, and I'm really pumped for Mason. And I said this at the end of one of the shows I did this week about 3 benefits of Mason Rudolph. If you haven't checked that out, go check it out. But one of the cool things I said was he had all that. That was Bengals was the team that got him benched. Really got him benched big time for Duck Hodges, and then rode it out for a few weeks. I think Duck Hodges back in that year in 2019, that away game against the Bengals, threw the touchdown that won them the game. But in this week's game, he gets to play the team that he debuted against. And I think that's really, really cool. Next week, he gets to play the team that knocked him out. It sucks that he doesn't get to play the Browns, but imagine if we played the Browns in the playoffs and Mason Rudolph's back there. It's like a Mason Rudolph redemption tour, and I freaking love it. I'm so freaking here for it. It's so cool. I don't know. I just think it's awesome that this is the case. Jed also sent Trubisky back. It's funny though, because I was thinking about this the other day with Trubisky. We talk about Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields is a much, much better player. I feel like he's done more than what, but he hasn't gotten to the playoffs, and Mitch did. The Bears just can't get this right. They just can't get it right. So, looking on the offensive side as well, in terms of the Seahawks and how the Steelers are going to stop them, I was interested to see. I totally forgot they drafted Colby Parkinson out of Stanford. He's a really decent tight end, a couple of years in the league now. He's got 2 TDs on the season. They got Noah Fant in there. Noah Fant went on the injury cloud a little bit this week. But Noah Fant's been there. He hasn't caught as many balls as you think, but they've kind of been all over the place at quarterback as well. It really comes down to Metcalf and Lockett and Bobo, their wide receiver as well. Jake Bobo, he was limited this week and then full practice Thursday. When I saw him limited, I was like, that's good for us because he has been pretty good. Off the pub, enjoy Portner. Thanks for tuning in. Catch a show tomorrow with Shannon White. We did a preview from an extra global perspective this week, so I hope you enjoy that one. But yeah, enjoy the pub. It's a Friday night. Enjoy. And so the Winchester. I like the Winchester. That's a good name. But yeah, going back to the offense. So the Seahawks so far in the season have about 3,600, I think it's 88 yards off the top of my head. Don't have that in front of me right now. So that's an interesting situation for the Steelers, because when you compare it to them, they've got 2,900 right now on the season. So this is going to be an offense that, despite Geno Smith's, he's had a few injury clouds. He hasn't had all the best games. Shannon and I talked about the fact that the 35-41 game that they lost to the Cowboys, they can put up a heap of points really, really quickly. So it's going to be an interesting one for the Steelers. As I say, this patchwork defense with the linebacking core and the cornerbacks, to get out there and play. So that again is the Steelers are going to have to be on the money, and that's where it's going to be really hard when you're traveling away, 12th man in Seattle after a big week of Christmas cheer and heading into New Year. All those good things. It is going to be interesting to see, can this team turn up to play? They've got so much on the line, and that's what I'm excited to see. It's very Pittsburgh Steelers to be fighting tooth and nail to the death. Oh, you didn't get a notification. It's interesting, Pittsburgh Toddy. So I pre-scheduled the live 15 minutes earlier so that, because sometimes that'll pop up. So YouTube's doing really weird things right now for the live shows that people do. You might have seen this from Mark with the Steeler Nation Australia stuff. They're trying to hide lives, but if you put it in and I schedule it, if you're a sub, so if anyone watching and I'm watching back to this and you're a sub, hit that sub button, because it should come up in your when you go through your browse feed, it should come up there. But then I have seen it, not just in your case, I have seen it come up where it doesn't actually then send the notification properly, because it'll send the notification to you when it's scheduled. So there's some weird things going on. And then you've got the double integration of I don't do these live or record them from YouTube. I do them via StreamYard. And sometimes that integration with YouTube is not as seamless as it should be. So, yeah, all good. But just so you know on that one. And I also went later today than we usually do. But I was conscious that 4:30 East Coast between Christmas and New Year, people are probably out doing things, or if those work and they want to try and get home and stuff like that. So I went a little bit later as well. So that probably didn't help the case there. But yeah, we talked a lot about, hey, Homer, how you doing, mate? So yeah, as I say, going back into that defense, I think that that's where I want to talk about as well. Where JW, you talked about the run game earlier on in the show on the live chat, and so the run game, like Kenneth Walker, I feel like if the Steelers can shut him down early, and I say this is why it's kind of helpful when he's got the illnesses this week. I mean, shut him. I'm sure I'll check this after the show. They'll have put up the injury report, and he'll be right as rain, ready to go, raring to go. It won't have been a big deal. But the Steelers D-line and linebackers can shut down that run game early and often. Okay. So they have updated the injury report. I will have a look at this for us. So, because I didn't show it properly before. But yeah, if the Steelers can shut down that run game early and often, it's going to make a big difference to how they can defend guys like Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf, the weapons that can be Parkinson and all that. All right. So they've put the injury report back up. So Jamal Adams is out this week. That is very good for the Steelers run game. Nick Bellor, their linebacker, didn't practice all week. He's questionable. Maybe he doesn't play. Jordan Brooks is questionable. So we talked about him earlier on the show. Did not practice Wednesday, did not practice Thursday, limited Friday. You've got Mario Edwards, their defensive end, out. That's a big deal for them. He's a pretty decent player for them, a good, at least minimum depth piece. Dwayne Eskridge is out. As I said earlier in the show, for those that just joined us, he only has had about 100, I think it's 43 yards on offense this year. So it's not that big a deal for them that he's not there. You have Kenneth Walker Jr. is questionable now. That is huge. And same with Devin Witherspoon. The Steelers, I feel like we've had no luck all year and we're now getting a bit of luck. So it's so weird. It's like the games that we play where they let a team rack up a score and they try and come back and do it. It's a stressful situation to be a Steelers fan. That's kind of all there is to it. It's just going to be stressful. So anyway, that is what it is. We still love the black and gold. So as I said, the defense is going to be a really big part, stopping that run game. DeMarvin Leal, I think, and Ogunjobi, they really need to have, if DeMarvin Leal does even get a helmet. You saw a lot more Loudermilk last week. Whoever's in that D lineup outside of Hayward and Benson, they have to have a big game here. They have to be collapsing pockets. They have to be pressuring the run game. The Seahawks can do a lot of jet sweeps if they want to. They've got guys that are equivalent there. They've got two tight ends that are pretty versatile that can both block and catch the football in Parkinson and Noah Fant. So it is going to be pretty interesting. Plus, you've got Geno Smith who can get the ball out really quickly. You've got Geno Smith who's got a bit of mobility. It really is a situation where the Steelers just have to, and I think it kind of sums up how I'm feeling about it. They just have to execute this week. If they execute the game plan, and they've talked about that when they've lost games, said we didn't execute properly. Okay, so you defended your coaching staff, you defended your schemes. If it's down to execution, you just have to execute. So that's a really, really, I think that's the theme. If I was Mike Tomlin in the coaching in the locker room, in the game, the stuff they do in the hotel the night before the game and those final, preparations, it's you have to execute. That is what this patchwork roster of, and it's mostly veterans. I almost put that in the title, but there are obviously some young guys getting involved and getting in the mix, like Pickens. But it's just kind of I don't know. It's kind of I don't want to say the misfits. These guys are professionals or NFL players. The Steelers. You look last week when they were putting up all the, they do those little head previews when they start the game on offense and defense. We're getting all the guys from the top colleges, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, they're all in there. So you're not going to call them a misfit. They're professionals. There's a lot of highly drafted guys. But it's this hodgepodge, patchwork quilt team that comes together. And it's, I don't know, they're kind of to me, they're kind of earning this narrative, particularly if they can win this week and then even beat the Ravens. They're this kind of like the misfits, these rogues. It's kind of cool to support. I kind of like it. It's just different. It feels very different. I love it in the live chat. That is great. Yeah, that's a really good segue, Jedevil, as well. The run game. The Steelers' run game has to turn up this week. No ifs, buts about it. The Steelers, if they're going to win this game on the road, in the cold, in Seattle, 12th man, all those things, they absolutely, positively have to be able to run the football, not just stop the run. Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, really about the injury report, and Najee Harris having an injury, that's got to come into play as well. But as I say, it's probably more a niggle than anything else. But if you look at the rush yardage, so the most we've had this season against the Packers, 205 yards, but 172 against the Browns. We ran 166 up against the Titans. We did 153 up against the Bengals in game 1. Ran 130 up against the Cardinals. We ran 114 up against the Texans. Bills game we lost, and we ran 113 up last week against the Bengals. They need another. They've only done 150 yards 4 times plus this season 4 times. But if they can get the more than 130 than they got against the Cardinals, I really think they can go down and put the pressure on this because as much as there's weapons in Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba, Metcalf, who I talked about, if the Steelers know those guys can be used, the Steelers have Mike Tomlin, regardless of what people think of him, and Terrell Austin there that are secondary coaches. If they can't scheme up a plan for these guys to shut them down, plus the Steelers have something that they didn't have before in the last couple of weeks. One, Eric Rowe's in there, and I think he's playing. I want to do a show this week. I didn't get a chance to on him, but I'll definitely do one depending on how he plays this week on Eric Rowe, and whether it's worth bringing him back next year. But Pat P at safety is not something there's a lot of tape on. That is very good. That's element of surprise for the Steelers. So I kind of really love that. Yeah, man. I hope so, man. I hope so. But I talked about a lot about it with Shannon in the previous show Get Tomorrow. I want to see them work Najee into the short passing game. I can't say that enough. I said it a lot on that show, so toward the latter half of that show. So when it comes out tomorrow, you can check that out. I don't want to repeat myself like twice. It's both boring for you guys. But yeah, that's it's a huge piece. And Warren, obviously, what he knew in the past game. I want to see lots of Najee Warren on the field at the same time. Unpredictable. You can do short passing. You can do one's one going to block for the other. Who's going to run the ball? Like it's just smash mouth football in this game. Pittsburgh Toddy says, aside from the deep balls to Pickens, Mason made most of his completions on speed outs. Seattle will focus on shutting these down. Najee, exactly. And so one of the things I talked about on one of the shows with Shannon, the one that came out yesterday, for those who haven't caught it all, I think it was the one that's coming out tomorrow. Because we talked for so long. We talked to each other. We did the first show. We talked all about each other, talked to each other. Then we did the second show, and then we talked a bit more. So it was like an hour and a half, and we did the 2 shows. But one of the things that I was saying to him was that if Deontay Deontay could have a really big game in this against the Seahawks if he can get the right mindset. If he can find if they use him right. If they can find a way to wedge him between that second level of Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks obviously out, which is a big deal for them. But if he can wedge himself between the second level of the linebackers and the DBs, I think he could go off. I could think this could be Yak City. Even in the cold, like Lockett can do it over there. Like it could be absolute Yak City because the way that even that cornerback room now, they're missing Devin Witherspoon. Yes, they've got Tariq Woolen. I think when I had the injury report up before, I think Quandre Diggs was injured as well. So if he's out, I'll just check that because he was a limited practice. And then, so Quandre Diggs is being rested all week. But, and then, yeah, they've got Trey Brown. He's been there. But not having Devin Witherspoon is huge for them. So if you can get Deontay Johnson between that second and third level, I think it absolutely could be Yard City after the catch. Absolutely Yard City after the catch. Alan says, Simon chat, yeah, man, it's getting hot. It's pretty good. Pickens back to being Pickens. Exactly. Yeah. So we talked about this. You'll love it, Jet Evil, in tomorrow's show. that's coming out that I did with Shannon White, the second episode, the second part 2 kind of thing of the global perspective for this week that he and I do. And for those of you that haven't caught on that show yet, I really enjoy talking to Shannon. We want to get it earlier happening on the season, but with my wedding, things got kind of, it was difficult for us to arrange it, but we've now managed to get that, and it'll be awesome in the off season. Because he and I love talking team building and drafting and all those good things. But yeah, we talk about Devin Bush and what we want to see out of Devin Bush in this game. Let's just say I want to see him absolutely get pancaked and steamrolled. But yeah, Artie Burns. I mean, this is the thing. I didn't think he played a lot of snaps. We might pull that up actually in terms of how many snaps he's got, because I didn't think he played a heck ton of snaps this season for Seattle. But I hate Pro Football Reference. It auto plays. I love it, but I hate that it auto plays all the time. So he has had on the season so far. See me. Artie Burns. So he played in 12 games, started 1, 20 tackles on the season, 2 tackles for a loss, 2 pass defense. Let's go into him. I reckon you're going to see him get burned with air yards. I don't know what his air yard. I reckon he's been burned. Let's bring that up. I'll present that for you guys. Make sure you guys help me out with any questions as well, because I love when we do that in live chat. So he has allowed a quarterback rating of 90 this season, 65% completion, 12.2 yards per completion. Yeah, he's getting burned by. Oh, it's the yak yardage. Man. Yeah, 13 miss. It's only 13% missed tackles. But yeah, yak yardage is killing him. So yeah, it could be. I mean, Deontay knows Artie Burns. They train together. Could be a bad news for him. Could be bad news for Artie Burns. Well, I mean, I think the injury hurt him. I think he probably thought, hey, like, what's the minimum I can do without like screwing myself up? And I don't think he is better in a 4-3 defense. I don't think. Yeah, I mean, you got to tackle if you're a linebacker. You just do. I wondered whether he would, because he's fast enough, he would at some point consider trying to be like that box safety, try and convert to safety. But particularly we saw the coverage skills that we saw in his rookie year, but it wasn't something that he seemed to really have wanted to do. So, but again, you got to tackle at safety as well. That's absolutely key. But we talked all about run game. We talked about the pass game in terms of Pickens and Deontay. Freiermuth could be a real weapon out there. Now, because I talked a lot about the Seahawks tight ends. I think, and I like the tight end room of like Washington, Freiermuth, and Connor Haywood. That mix is very hard to scheme against. Actually, I'll bring that up because it's kind of interesting when you look at the spread. Now, the Steelers have I'm not sitting here saying it's like all glory days in the passing game right now just because of what Mason did. Because really the Steelers offense, like I was actually really disappointed when I saw 2,900 yards and I saw the spread. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective the last few weeks, but they're really behind in terms of where I kind of hoped they'd be and what like the top teams in the NFL do. But defense wins games and that is what it is. But when you look at let's see how big it is for you guys. I'll make it bigger. So when you look at and I mean, some people listen on mobile anyway, so it's more about me talking through it, but that's cool. When you look at the receiving yards, so George Pickens is obviously number 1 right now with 1,009. Yeah, I'll talk a little about that actually for you as well, Homer, because I mentioned Pat P before and how you scheme at that. I really like it. And again, Shannon and I talked about that in I think it was a show that came out yesterday. We talked about we did. We talked about the long-term moves of Pat P. We talked about that for about 5 minutes, about halfway through, 2/3 through the show. But yeah, Pickens got the 1,009 yards, 56 from 97, catch percentage of 57%. Deontay's got the 552. Warren's got 330. Robinson's got 280. As I said, that kind of surprised me. But you've got like 163, 243 between Pat and Connor Haywood. Darnell like has nothing. We talked about that a lot. But like, I think it's pretty interesting in terms of the tight end position because there is potential there. We just haven't seen it. And then there's the X factor, which I saw Mason trying to work into this offense, and I was so freaking thankful in Calvin Austin III. I wanted to start the season each week. He could be the X factor. He could be the X factor. He could be the X factor. He played well against Rays. He could be the X factor. Not used properly. Not used properly. Not used properly. Not used properly. I kind of gave up on it because it just kind of annoyed me after a while. Like every time I said it, I got more frustrated. And then I saw him get worked in last week, and I was really excited by it. So I'm going to say this week, perhaps he could be an X factor in this offense purely because they're actually starting to get him on the field and use him more. That's helpful. Sam Muller says, here we go for the game. Alien runs, white runs, dirty Sprite. Nice. Organics. And then Pittsburgh's Toddy says, yeah, Alan Bush was pretty damn as good as a rookie with that. Oh, mate, that game against the Chargers, he won them that game. Remember, that game was like, that was just, yeah, that was ridiculous. I think that was like 3 forced fumbles, and he had like an interception, and he had like 6 tackles for a loss. That was a ridiculous game for us. But yeah, I was all pre-injury, and I think that injury obviously didn't just affect him physically. Like physically, there's the stuff it affects you in the head sometimes, some injuries. That is pretty huge. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting in terms of yards per reception was like, look at what you get out of 3 tight ends. When the Steelers throw it to the 3 tight ends, they get a minimum of 7.8 yards. But with Darnell, it's 8.7 because he falls forward. It's like 3 yards. Mark talks about this all the time. He and I were talking about that back in the before the season started, the bonus that he can be literally physics. A guy that's 6'8" falls flat. Like, how many yards do you get, you know? But Freemuth averages 9 yards a catch. And I think that they've got to work Freemuth in this week. Working Freemuth in will be huge. But Homer, you asked me about what Pat P did at safety. Yes, so actually I'll bring up the split for that because I saw some interesting things there, but I want to get those stats right for you. But I really liked, as I said, we talked about this. Shannon and I did talk about it on the show that came out yesterday a lot, so I don't want to hop on it too long. But I did really like what I saw from Pat P there. I did, and I thought this could be really something for him going forward, and it actually could keep him on. It could keep him on the Steelers longer term. It really could. So I am really excited by what this means for him. But I'm going to pull up for you his game stats. Let me show you this because we use the advanced stats and we can compare them. All right. So, excuse me. Advanced. So when you look at his, why isn't it pulling it up for me? Here we go. Yeah. So per game, why isn't it? It's not doing it. It's not doing it for me. I don't know why Pro Football Reference isn't doing it for me today. I don't like that. It's usually very, very good at this. It switches over for the per game. Why isn't it doing it? This is not very good content for you guys. Let's go. Let's just go. We'll just go into the score. Oh, there we go. Where's game splits? And now it's lagging. Great. And this should get it up. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. This is what I wanted to do. Pro Football Reference does not always work. It doesn't always make it easier for us. But now I can bring this up. So look at his, when we go, it's going to do advanced for me. No, it's not going to do advanced. Damn it. I wanted to show you the difference in air yards. I'll have to go calculate that for you guys. But the answer is, I do really like what he does there. In pass defenses, he had 1 pass defense. He had an interception, second interception on the season. Combined tackles, he had 2. That's pretty on par. That's nothing like different from them. Played 100% of the defensive snaps. He's kind of been on the field all season with that because he's kind of been this like quarterback of the defense at times, particularly with Minka being out. So I kind of love it. Like he's obviously not had the season statistically that he had last year where he had like the 5 interceptions, But right now, with 2 games to go, he has 2 interceptions, 11 pass defenses on the season. I like that. I like that. If you can get that from a safety each season, that's a good thing. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good thing. I really like it. I think it prolongs his career. However, and Shannon rightly said this in the segment that we did, he cannot be. You're not going to have Minka. Almost Minka is probably going to convert to strong safety, and it's a waste of Minka's talent. Pat P's got to be your third safety, a flex cornerback. That's what the role he's got to play. He's not going to be starting strong safety, and the Steelers need to fix that. I talked about that all off season. Talked about that I talked about that literally almost every second show. The fact that I've talked about it, I talk about that every second show. But they need a proper strong safety. Minka's your starting free safety. So Pat Peterson be your third safety. You just call him like a D. You just call him the defensive back, and they can just scheme him wherever they like. But I really like it. I think it'll prolong his career. I think it'll prolong it in Pittsburgh particularly. If otherwise, he's not worth the money to bring him back at cornerback. I want to bring him back. I just don't want to pay him that much. So Alan said he got injured and he was never saying, let's hope X-Steelers have a bad game. Against Pittsburgh, Toddy, another one draft pick moving on Bush. Yeah. Kevin, Mark's got a lot of work stuff going on. Mark's got the Steel Nation Australia channel going on. We talked about what this looks like in the off season. He's got a lot of his jobs outside of YouTube that he has in the off season. I can't say what will happen next season or what have you. It's not that we don't want to do them together. It's a timing thing. I've got a lot going on as well. So we're just going to try and make it happen when we can. But it's probably been a little bit with Christmas and stuff. And it's summer here in Australia, and he does the pickleball. And it goes pretty often. Summer at school holidays as well. So I know he's doing a lot of the pickleball coaching for kids and stuff. So we're going to try and make it work when we can. It might be just a little bit off in terms of the day or regularity, but I know you guys like tuning in on a Friday afternoon. So that's why, I'm making sure, you definitely will get shows on Friday, but I'll do my best to get you alive as well, or premiere and be there with you in that live chat. But yeah, we do enjoy it. We still want to do the shows when we can. It's just about getting that schedule together. And then, I've got to sit down and we'll talk about, next season and stuff like that. But yeah, that's how we do it. And I agree. We love talking ball with each other. We love the chemistry that it has. It's a lot easier to do lives with 2 people, to be honest. But yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, it's not like we're not doing shows together, if that makes sense. Pittsburgh, Toddy says, Pape's slow to CB, but still is elite speed safety. Yeah, I mean, the thing about safety and speed is it's also not just about like explosive. It's about range, and it's about pace, and it's about anticipation. And you're tapping into a Hall of Fame level DB in or CB in Peterson, and that's why I agree with you. I agree with you, Toddy. But I also think it's like that anticipation, the play recognition, that's huge, and I think that's a big difference in terms of a massive advantage that Patrick Peterson would bring to it. It's possible. Yeah, for him to convert there. I love the old Batman stuff. Alan says, and we're going to wrap it up in a couple minutes, but Alan says, going to be an uphill battle Sunday. Not many outside of Pittsburgh give them much of a chance. What do they know? Huh? Exactly. I think I would rather be the Pittsburgh Steelers going this game than the Seattle Seahawks. 100%. They're at home. They've got everything on the line. They've got it on offense. They've got their quarterback back. So they're under pressure there. They've got a heap of guys out on defense. I wouldn't want to be Seattle in this game, because they lose this, they're pretty much out. Like with the way that the Rams are sitting in their division, that's not going to happen for them. John Davis says, y'all think we can score enough to beat the Seahawks? I think it's more it's more if we can shut their run game down and shut them down. We don't have to score as many. That's how I see it anyway. If you go shootout, I don't think, having watched parts of that game, the Dallas Seahawks game earlier in the year, I don't think we're going to a shootout. If you're someone that bets, you're probably not betting a lot of money on the Steelers winning a shootout. But yeah, I hope they air it out for sure. And that's what's so good about last week, because of what they put on tape, and like they scored long range touchdowns, not off massive deep balls. It's a very hard thing for the Seahawks to defensively scheme against, particularly when you've got to think about the two running backs in Najee and Warren, who both can catch it. Not that they choose using Najee the last 2 years properly in the passing game, but they are using Warren. And if they can start using Najee like they did against the Ravens last year, and the back half of the season, and a little bit against the Raiders that they did last year, that's going to be really, really difficult for the Seahawks to have to scheme against. I'm going to wrap it up in a couple minutes. If anyone's got any last Q&A, happy to answer any last Q&A, throw that out in the live chat. Got through everything I want to talk about in terms of how we can stop their explosive weapons, why the run game is important, how the Steelers patchwork defense has come together. And it's really cool to see. I'm glad we're not sitting there like having to go through the motions with the Steelers out and not being able to make the playoffs. Pittsburgh, Toddy says the Steelers need to take the crowd out of the game, control the clock and grind. Totally. And frustrate the crowd. Totally. Alan says they didn't play Fright and living their feet. You know what? Mason didn't. And that's what I talked about it as well, like earlier on the show. If you're playing, if you got a choice and you could say, guys, can be fit the whole year, quarterback, you're going to pick Kenny Pickett every time. Not just because you want to see him, but because of all the things he brings as a quarterback. But contextually, under pressure, back against the wall, you're kind of like, veteran Mason Rudolph, considering everything he's been through. Mason, that's it, JJ. That is it. John says, I just don't want to get out. Yeah. But they didn't last week, and Zach Taylor has out-coached them at times. So, this is kind of like, for Mike Tomlin, he lost against Belichick. Really probably doesn't want to lose and have that loss against Pete Carroll on his record. The Steelers have done terrible against the Seahawks, so if he can square that ledger up even better away, that is huge. Remember, the Steelers have done okay away this year. And then we beat the Rams on the road out there. We beat the Raiders out west too. So we didn't do that well against Houston, but we've actually not done that bad on the West Coast this year. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun New Year's Day for me because game's New Year's Day. I've got that. I've got Longhorns playing college football playoff against Washington. So double header for me. Going to be awesome. A lot of football. But yeah, with that, we might wrap up the show. As I said, thank you very much for everyone for joining. Really cool live chat. Some different names in here as well. I've seen you guys a little bit around on the channel, or if you've hit that sub button, I've seen it. For those who are new to the channel, they're watching this back on replay, or that are watching live that aren't subbed, hit that sub button. Helps us. We're on a race to 500. We want to get to 500 as fast as we possibly can. And then we'll be under the 1,000. But the real goal is like 500 by the season end. That's what I'm still striving for. It is happening. We are seeing subs pick up. That's where you get notifications. And there's some cool things. Once we get to 500 subs, we can do some cool things that YouTube doesn't allow me to do now. A lot of content coming away. Good show coming tomorrow. Shannon and I did a preview for this game. We're talking a lot of different ins and outs on all different things. We had a show yesterday talking about what we call the global perspective, when Mike Tomlin uses that phrase when he's thinking sort of more the overarching bird's eye view, macro perspective. We talked about those things and how the Bengals win shifted the narrative on key players and some of the teams. So that's pretty cool content. If you missed that, I kept that to about half an hour. Preview show tomorrow is about half an hour as well. Know that you guys, only have a certain number of times. Some of you will just have been live on this for the full hour. Some of you listen back to this for the full hour. So conscious of your time, and you've got to divvy that up against a lot of Steelers media. So we're always super, super appreciative of it. Thank you, Daredevil. Yeah, man. Do not stuff around with fireworks. You don't want the Jason Pierre-Paul, club. And yeah, you don't want that situation. But as always, go Steelers.